Hello, welcome to the April 29th, 2025 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I am the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the live chat field, or as we are, let me just mute quick source, or you could simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, I realize my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed, but we will go through all the questions asked chronologically. So if you don't see an immediate answer to your question, we will get to it as long as it's in the queue. So if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running or other Steinberg products, so if it's Cubase 11, 12, 13, 14, if you're running on Mac or Windows, and also if it is Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that information is helpful. We should have an index of all of the topics that are discussed today in the live stream today. And several hours after the live stream ends with timestamps, you could quickly navigate to particular topics and find those. But if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered on previous live streams, Jan in Sweden in Stockholm has created CubaseIndex.com, and you could go there and search through over 38,000 different topics. So we'll give a special thanks to Jan for his efforts. We have two people that serve as moderators, Agent K and Jazz Dude. We want to thank them for their efforts. They're not Steinberg employees. They just wanted to make it a better community experience. Also, we want to give a special thanks to directly to Jazz Dude for his works with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. It's a wonderful resource of information for for the Steinberg community. So lots of great links and articles posted there. It's a great kind of resource, a collection of information. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work with Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you are attending live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. So apologize that we haven't had live streams for last couple weeks. I was on vacation, and then I had kind of our corporate kickoff at Yamaha at our brand new office in Buena Park, California. We had a grand opening celebration, but it's wonderful to be back, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so we see Tim K just says, welcome back from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven, Mark Raven's dog Stella, and other pets. He's ready to learn new tricks. All right, we have Barry Chabala says this is his first live stream. We just got Cubase Pro 14. Welcome to the Club Cubase live streams, and any questions you have, if you think it's the most basic question or most advanced question, please feel free to ask. And thanks for joining our community. All right, we see Stefan from Sweden. Jorge Oliveira asks, just updated from Cubase AI to Cubase Artist 14, starting to explore it now. I had Cubase AI for a couple years but never used it, and he's starting to learn it now. That's great, and welcome to the live stream. Glad you can join us today. All right, we see Jan, happy that we're all back together. Memento from Finland asks, could you please explain again how to get the tempo from audio track with many instruments? Thanks. Okay, so let me just open up a different project here. Let's see if I have it. All right. Okay, so when we want to get a tempo track from, let's say, an audio recording that maybe wasn't recorded to a particular click track, so let's come over and let's take this. So we have a click track, but the click track isn't following. So what we could do is, let me see, I'll just do a different, I did a tempo track of this already. So let's say I'll do a new version of my tempo track and we'll listen to this recording. So if we want to take a recording and do a tempo map of it, really all we would need to do, and I'll just do this from scratch because I may already have musical mode enabled. So let's say we'll just come over here, let's import quick audio file. All right, so now when we listen to this, there's no correlations to the click and this file. So I'm going to select the file. We'll go to our project menu. In other previous versions, this changed slightly, but when we go, you may see tempo detection in 14.02. When we go to the tempo track, we now see tempo detection as a little break off window because it added some additional functions. So I'm going to do tempo detection. We'll say analyze. I'm going to select the event. And now when we look at it, so I'll just decrease the volume of this. All right, so we have determined a tempo, and when we do this, we also just kind of see, and if we want to, we could just change our meter here. So I'm going to change this from 1/4 to 4/4. And now we have the tempo map of our song. Now if we want to make this song play a steady tempo, so when we kind of look at our tempo, we're roughly, let's say, fluctuating from 122 to 130. So if I select the particular event and I want this audio file to play back at a perfect tempo, I can now just go to my audio menu to advanced. We will say we're going to set definition from tempo, and we could do it at the project level or put it into the file. And now I could just put in any tempo that I want. So if I want it to be 144, now it's playing back perfectly steady, and every single beat of the audio file will stretch to play the new tempo. Or we could have it play its original tempo. So once again, select the file, go to your project menu. In 1401 and earlier, you may notice it would be under directly under tempo, directly under the project menu. But now it's going to be when you go to the tempo track, and we'll say, and you'll see the tempo detection right there. All right, so we see Soren from Sweden, hoping that everyone is doing well. All right, we see Jack Bourne on. We see Vince Flyvey from Winnipeg. Wonderful to see you on. We see Jan sharing appreciation for Jazz Dude's effort with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. All right, we see Benny on proceeding. We see Parabot 2. Great to see you back. All right, Yash Desai. Greg, how do I sign up for the Cubase 15 beta program? So you could reach out to Steinberg directly with that. Maybe if you send something to info@Steinberg, and if it's, and then you might be able to, when beta programs are starting, you could probably reach out to them. And what's always a good idea is to perhaps send what you would consider a beta report. Like if you find something you think is a bug, how like each of the steps that you would do to recreate the bug or to find that particular situation, because often beta testing is not necessarily what you want to see, but kind of what is presented in front of you, and like very methodical methods of doing that. So if you sent it maybe to one of the support@steinberg.de or an email address like that and include, I'm sure that they would pass it along to the correct people who are in charge of the quality assurance. We have Alex Ivanov just saying hello to everyone. Tony Trunzo from Australia says, hi, Greg. Could you please show what the procedure to make a bass guitar tab, please? Thank you. Okay, so this is going to be slightly different in 14 with the new Dorca engine, but let's go ahead and let me just get a bass part. Probably load up one. Inventive bass part. Alright, so let's say I have this part and we want to see this. So I'm just going to call this and we could give it like a name like a bass guitar, something like that. So when we go into the score editor, so we'll just come over here, go open up in the score editor, we could see kind of our notes. Let me just adjust this here. Hang on. Okay. All right, so let's say if we want to come over here, so we go to the settings and we would say the instrument settings. And then, so again, we just come over to the settings here. We could also go to your score menu, to instrument settings. And we're going to say, okay, this instrument type is a 4-string bass guitar. And where it says presentation, we could say I want to do notation plus tablature. And now we could see the tablature. And if we wanted to show the rhythms in the tablature, we could just come over here or just show tablature only. So again, just if you select the instrument, select a part, go to settings, click on the instrument tab, and you could just come right over here and in the presentation. And it helps if you give it like what instrument type it is. You could just choose your different tablature options right there. So if you wanted to show both with the rhythmic tab, you could do it like that. All right, so we see Jack Bourne says, Greg, hope your trip went well. Nice to have you back. Have work in a couple hours. Wish I could listen while at work. I think there's a lot of people listen at work. But yeah, I had a wonderful vacation in Maui in Hawaii, so just really spectacular as always. highly recommend it. All right, Guitar Wisdom asks, hi Greg, thanks in advance. Cubase 14 Pro, Windows 10, trying to get the hang of MediaBay. When I search, it's limited to selected folder, not subfolder. That seems much less useful. Can it be changed? Okay, so let's say if we come over to our MediaBay, so we'll just open this up here. All right, and I think that there is like an option here for, let's just come over to preferences or settings, depending on your OS. But let's get to MediaBay that we would, that there's like, it's not there. Let me just, all right. All right, so let's say if I come over to, I want to look in a particular file here. So let's say we'll go to this folder. All right, so we just find something that has subfolders in it. Okay, so let's say if I'm here and I select the audio folder. So let's say if I come here, let's say now if we want to actually look just in the audio folder versus like clip packages. So let me I'll just create something here real quick so we could show this. Okay, so I'm going to copy this folder into the Groove Agent folder. So here we're going to have a subfolder. So I'm going to say Groove Agent 4.2 folder. We will come over. Okay, so I'm going to activate this folder. And when we look at this particular folder, we see all of the files that are in this folder. So let's say if I go to April 2024, we can see all the files here that are going to be dated April 4th, 2025. So we'll have this particular folder, so we can see the dates here. You know, when I select the folder here, this is automatically looking at, we'll see the 4425 plus files from 2515. So selecting this folder is automatically looking. So while we don't select it, it is automatically looking within that particular folder right there. So anything that's in that folder that's applicable to MediaBay is going to be shown. So if I just select the April 4th, 2025 folder, I see all the date modifiers. I don't see the programs from 2515. So now when I select a folder, I get the 2515 files and the 4425 files, just right like that. So selecting the kind of the top folder will include the different subfolders as well. So let me know if that makes sense. And let me just see if there's, so, but it looks like it's automatically doing that for us. Okay, so we have Recyclop saying hello, calling in from Finland. We have DJ FK sending greetings from Germany. All right, so we have Barry Chabala says his first live stream. It's new to Cubase Pro 14 from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thanks for joining us today. It's one of the few cities I haven't been to in the United States. All right, Jorge is just sending greetings from Portugal, where his electrical power is restored. Yeah, it's pretty sad to hear that, but glad everything is back. All right, Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas asks, would selecting all tracks and setting the volume at minus 12 dB be a proper way to gain stage, and would 12 dB be set at the peak of the transient? They've been using the pre-gain set to gain stage. So a lot of people, when they are doing a mix, so it could really depend upon the material that you have. So sometimes when people start with everything at minus 12 dB or put all faders at minus 12 dB, if you have very low level amplitude or something that's super loud, just kind of setting it to a particular, constant value may not help you so much with that. But let's say if we have a number of audio tracks here, so a lot of people, will use, let's activate the project, we'll use like the pre-gain to attenuate. So as we come over here, let's say into our mix console, and we look at the pre-section, let me just set up the sections here, and we'll say pre, that they could kind of start with everything down a little bit, but it could really depend if that's going to hurt you later, so you could do it at the pre level here, where you just say, okay, we're going to adjust our gain down 12 dB. Some people will do that, but if you already have a mix that is set up, this could affect the gain structure of the tracks going into your dynamics processors. So be aware of that. That could be an issue. So, I probably wouldn't globally set everything down minus 12. You may want the results to be at minus 12. So, I think it's probably makes more sense to have your different tracks wherever their volume is. So if one track is recorded very loud, one track is recorded very soft, putting them at minus 12 dB in either the fader or the pre-section may not work for both of them, but I think that you could use either method to try to get the gain of the track to around minus 12 dB. So, if everything was recorded at 0 dB and then you wanted to bring everything down, that would be one thing, but probably there's going to be a disparity in volume between the different tracks as they're recorded. Like a snare drum may be, louder than an acoustic guitar, how it's recorded and how it's performed. So I would adjust the gain structure, not necessarily like a minus 12 dB default on a fader or in the pre-gain routing, but so that the actual tracks themselves can be set up for minus 12 dB. All right, so we have Alex Ivanov checking in from Deutschland. Thanks for joining us. We have Michael Graybill just saying welcome back and saying hi from Dallas to everyone. Thank you for that. It's great to be back. All right, Dean Garvey Jazz is saying hello from the Southern Sierra north of Los Angeles. All right, Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California says hello, Greg. Thanks, Cubase short from last night using the mouse wheel to adjust the gain stage on the audio. Yeah. All right, we have John Barry. Great to see you on from a very sunny English Riviera. We see John Costigan checking in from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Great to have you on, as always. Very loyal attendee. All right, Jeff Kramer asks, when I update Cubase to a new version, I lose all my input-output connections from the older version. What am I doing wrong? So you should be able to just come over and, save the profile, because usually those particular settings, like the inputs and outputs, are going to be saved with a particular song. So I know, like, if I open up a project that I got from, so I look at my inputs and outputs here, go to my audio connections, I see inputs, outputs. Now if I go to a different project, let's say one from my friend Fred Corey's studio, and we open this up, we can see different input routing and different output routing based, on, and that's not complying to the particular project, but it's actually in the project. So it's not necessarily set from the studio itself, but what you can do is, if you're having problems carrying those forward, is if you go to your audio connections, it's just to save a simple preset of your inputs and outputs. And if you're starting off with a template, make sure that your template has those particular inputs and outputs defined. Otherwise, every time you're starting a project from that template, you may have different input-output routing choices. All right, I see Dean Garbage Jazz. Was there a Hallian 7.13 update issued on April 22nd, 2025? I had to revert to an earlier version of Hallian on Windows 10 after updating via Steinberg Download Assistant. An email was sent. So I think that I may have been on vacation when it was out, but I think I saw like an email. Let's just go to the Steinberg Download Assistant, and we'll check what the latest version of Hallian is. So just look under the VST. Yeah, so it looks like it was 7.13 is the latest version. I haven't installed it yet. I'll do it after the live stream for Friday's live stream. But yeah, so I haven't gone through that. So I'm still just like I'm catching up on work stuff. And let me know why you had to revert to an earlier version of Hallian on Windows 10. All right, so we have Jahian L. Price sending greetings from Granada Hills, California. James Daly from Vancouver. All right, James Daly asks, can't see the key name on this segment in VariAudio. All right. So let's take a look. Let's come over here to VariAudio. All right, so let's see if maybe if we adjust the height on it. I'm not sure. So you may have to just kind of hover over the parameters. Some of the, since there's lots of different controls, like if we show all of the smart controls, you may not want to see everything. All the parameters could be a bit cluttering. It could look a bit cluttered, I would say. And then as you hover, then you could see the detected pitch right there, like that. So let me know if that's kind of what you wanted to see. All right, we have Suede TV and Recording Studio from New Jersey saying hi, so wonderful to see you. All right, so Zephaniah asks, hi Greg, how do you get single notes to show up in the chord display in the score window? All right, so let's take a look. All right, all right, so let's say I have these MIDI parts here. I'll glue them together. All right, so we have chords that look like this. All right, and we want to see these in the score editor. So when we come over, we could see the individual chords, the individual notes within the chords right here. So again, once we come over, we can see the individual notes within the chords. So let me know if that's what you want to do. So, or let me know if I'm misunderstanding Zephaniah. All right. All right. So we have Miguel checking in from Atlanta, Georgia. Great city. Always loved going to Atlanta. All right, Jack Bourne asks, maybe purchasing a new drum VST, would it make sense to have the VST saved on the C drive, but the samples saved on a D drive? What about samples saved on external HDD? So it's pretty common to have, you know, if you have multiple drives, like I have a 1 terabyte drive that's full, you know, that's an external just samples. I have a 2 terabyte audio drive, and then I have a secondary 2 terabyte sample drive because I ran out of samples on my 1 terabyte. So that's a pretty common thing. So most of the most companies that are dealing with large sample libraries, and I'll show you what Steinberg does with this, will have some type of we call it a library manager, and this is where you could actually just come over here, and this is where you could set your default sample location to. So if you wanted to go to the settings, so you could set your default location, and you could also just simply move files to a new location right here. So it's pretty common to be able to take the samples of different instruments and have the samples on one dedicated hard drive. So I think a lot of people, that way they don't have to worry about, you know, they know how much space is on that drive, and you could take that drive to a different computer and still have all of your content with you. So yeah, so it's pretty common. Like on my work computer, which is what we're seeing in the live stream, I currently just have a single drive. But my studio PC, I have, you know, a system drive, 2 sample drives, and an audio drive, and a DVD. All right. Uno Memento wants people to whack the like button. SQ Nation says, how can I freeze buses or group tracks? Please help. So, you know, a bus or a group track doesn't have any data in it of itself to freeze. It's just kind of processing in real time. But let's say if I wanted to come here and I want to take all of my drums in this particular project, and these are all going to, let's say, so I have my drums going to a group track. So I'll come over here. I'm just going to add a group track to the selected tracks. We'll call this, we'll make it a stereo group. We'll call this drum group. So all my drums are now being routed to my drum group. So if I wanted to render that group, all that I would have to do is go over here. We'll go to File, Export, and we'll go to our file, Export Audio Mixdown. We'll see our drum group, and now what I want to do is we're going to export our drum group. And after export, I want to create an audio track. So, and I'm just going to do between the left and right locators here for time's sake. So I'll say export audio. And this is now our drum group. So all my drums are now rendered right there. So again, just go to File, Export Audio Mixdown, and you could do this for multiple groups at once if you wanted to, and select that and make sure the left and right locators in the project window are set around the entire contents. And at that point, you could include different effects if you wanted to, but you could just now, in essence, freeze the tracks. So another method could be just to, if they're not assigned to a group, is also just say, okay, I want to take multiple tracks here, and let's do an export audio. We'll do, from the edit menu, we'll do render in place. We'll go to our render settings. And we could choose, when you have multiple events selected, we could just say mix down to one audio file. So now I could just render. So this will give us kind of the same results, but it won't be tied. And now we can have our drum group that's rendered, and the other tracks, like if you wanted the other tracks to be muted or disabled, we could do that as well. So if you wanted to do an export audio mixdown, or go to edit to render in place and then use the mix down to one audio file choice, you could kind of get the same result either way. All right. All right, so we have Van Beats checking in from Serbia. Thanks for joining us. Dean Garvey Jazz asks, what will happen to Cubase 14 Pro support when Microsoft ends support for Windows 10? I've been unable to upgrade to Windows 11 on Intel NUC with the i7, 32 gigabytes of RAM. So, Cubase 14, I believe, will still be supported. There's lots of Mac operating systems that aren't supported, but Cubase 14 will be supported, so I don't think you'll run into any problems. It's not going to turn off just because you're running Windows 10. I still have Windows 7, Windows XP, maybe a Windows 98 machine, and even some old Ataris that Cubase still works. So, but the Cubase, I think, will still be supported. All right, Majid Bass Groove. Hi, Greg. I'm using Cubase Elements. Is there a limit on the number of tracks I can create in Cubase Elements on purpose? After having created a number of tracks, I can't duplicate tracks anymore. So yeah, there is a track limitation. It might be like 64 tracks. If you need more tracks than that, consider upgrading to Cubase Artist or Cubase Pro. All right, Angelina Gargano asks, will I need to buy a new PC if I'm using Windows 10? I can't seem to update to Windows 11. I use Cubase 14 Pro. Thanks, Greg. So I think, like as I just mentioned, that your Cubase will still be working. You may not. I think your Windows 10 will still turn on, but you may not get be able to reach out to Microsoft for supports, or Microsoft may not be doing like updates and upgrades on Windows 10, but as long as the operating system boots up, your Cubase will run on that operating system. We see Flyvy just says welcome back, so thank you. It's great to be back. All right, Gaz Melon's checking in from his first time from Thailand. Thanks for joining us from Thailand, or is it's probably in the middle of the night? I was just watching Facebook pictures from my next door neighbor growing up. She went to Thailand with her son. Seemed like they had a wonderful time. All right, so you see Guitar Wisdom says, okay, thanks for that. And I see what you see is what I want to see, but I don't. I don't see a setting that affects this. My files aren't visible unless I have the exact folder selected. So there is something like a deep track search in MediaBay. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see if I'm having back from vacation brain cramp or not. Let me just... Let's see if I can. Just look at preferences one more time. Yeah, I want to say that it seems like, let's see if I can find it in here somewhere. Let me just, okay, here. So look for this setting. So now, let's say if I'm in my projects and I go to Groove Agent 4.2, I only see, so if I select this, I only see like those particular files. But here, if we just check this, we'll see include folders and subfolders. So check this little box right here, and that will allow you to kind of see all of the subfolders. So give that a shot and let me know if that works for you. Okay. All right. It's wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Yuma, Arizona, formerly from North Carolina. Hope you're doing well and hope your studio is going well. All right. So we see in Thailand it's midnight. And Brian just asking, she says, trust that you had a fantastic vacation. So yeah, we got to go to a chocolate farm and just go out to the beach and swim with sea turtles, which is great. All right, great to see Darren Flake on. All right, and we see Lawrence Koch from Barn Door Recording in Rhode Island. And he says his Mac M4 Pro is running beautifully with Cubase 14. All right, so we see... Produced by Soki. Ask hello from Athens, Greece. Thanks for joining us today. I have an unpopular question, probably. Is there any way to mass set the BPM for audio tracks from the audio editor panel? I don't know if you can do it in the editor panel, but if you go into the pool window, so let's go to your media menu to the pool window and select the first track, hold down the shift key, select the bottom track. Then we could just come over here and adjust all of the tempos. So you could set the tempo here and do it once. And as we do this, we'll just say, okay, I want to edit the tempo. We'll say 100. And then that will change multiple audio files. We'll change the tempo stamp for multiple audio files to the same value. So once again, come over, go to your media menu to MediaBay. Not to MediaBay, but your audio pool. So go to open pool window, select all the files, and then change the value of 1, and that will change it to all of the selected tracks in your project. So let me know if that's helpful for you. And thanks for joining us from Athens. Always wanted to go there, haven't been there yet. All right, so we have Theory Suprayan from Mauritius Island. It says, could you please show how to randomly move MIDI notes slightly off Quantize to have a bit more human feel, please? Okay. Okay, so let's say we're looking at our MIDI notes in our editors. There's a couple different approaches to this. So let's say first, if we look at, I'll just do Command Shift I, we'll look at it in the in-place editor. So let's say we have our notes and we wanted to adjust their position slightly. There's a couple different approaches. One is in the inspector. If we come over, we'll see MIDI modifiers, and then we'll see random. So here we could say our random target is going to be position, and now we could kind of set our maximum and minimum values. So let's say, okay, I want to do 20. Now this will affect the playback, but not actually move the notes. But if we want it to move the notes to see the effect of the MIDI modifiers, we go to the MIDI menu and we choose Freeze MIDI modifiers, and we can see that those particular events will change. So that's one particular way. Another method that's often used is to go to the MIDI menu. Let's go to the logical editor. So I will select these events. So we'll go to the logical editor. We'll go to setup, and we can say we want to transform MIDI notes. And how we want to transform these MIDI notes is we're going to go to the action target, and we're going to go to the position, and we can say set to relative random values, and we can say between -20 and 20. So now when we apply, we could just adjust, and that will, and if you could do smaller amounts, so let's say between -5 and 5. So now we can just come over here and adjust the start position of notes. So two different approaches. So you could do it from the track inspector if you go to the MIDI modifiers and just randomize set the random target here to position. And then that will do it for playback. If you want to kind of burn in or render that setting, go to the freeze MIDI modifiers, or we could just come over here and choose to, in the logical editor, also found in the MIDI menu, to logical editor, select the event, and then we could transform MIDI notes, their position, to relative random values, and then we could say between -5 and 5, and that way you could try different things. So let me know if that's helpful for you. And thanks for joining us on the live stream. All right, so we have the artist known as Love. Just hoping that everyone's doing great. And it says, thanks for all you do, Greg. I've hit the like button. All right. James Daly says, thank you. I see what you mean. All right, James Daly asks, one more thing, I can't seem to hear the loops in the media bar when I have the control room on. I'm sure it's not set up right in the audio connection. So generally, when I have so I'll go to my audio connections. Let's come over here, say I want to audition through some different loops. All right, so now when I come over to my studio, to my audio connections, so I have my control room turned on here. So we see that we have the HS7s going now through the UR24C. So now when I click, we could audition. Now, when I have the control room disabled and I go to my outputs, if I have this set up, but I think if we have both, but for me, it's always worked when I activate the control room, that now we hear. And I will go to not my pool window, but through my audio connections. I'm going to turn off, set this to not connected, but then it will automatically route. So make sure that you have like the correct output routing in the control room and that it's being sent to a monitor there. All right, wonderful to see Michael Marshall on from Somerset, UK. All right, Virtual Alan just says, hi everyone, in my garden shed watching Greg do his magic while I pot some sweet peas. All right. So Parabot2 says, hi Greg, do you have any ideas on mimicking ADT, automatic double tracking? Thank you. So, usually it's kind of a short delay. And the delay is often kind of because you're kind of, doing it off the two different, the play head and the repro head on the tape deck. So let me just open up a file. We'll create a simple delay. So let me find. Let me just get another one here. Here, I'll just fix one thing with this. Just fine. All right, so let's
What did you say?
all right, so I'll just turn off the reverb here.
All away, and I'm left here for
So I will go ahead and just add, we'll try just, I'll add an effects channel. So there's a lot of different options. One that you may want to check out on delays would be the multi-tap delay. Has a lot of pretty amazing options.
I'm on the outside looking in.
All right, so we could now just come over here and choose that we want it to be kind of tape based.
All the lights went out and it got dark.
And here we could just kind of turn off sync.
Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here? I'm uninvited. Oh yeah, yeah.
So I'm not sure what the exact delay time between the two heads would be in milliseconds.
Would be the very last one to leave. I plan on loving you forever. Didn't you see?
And then if you wanted to come over here to
the way I looked at you, I fell right through. Oh, I do it all for you. I'm uninvited.
you can put on different filters or different effects on the different delays. So, you know, check out the multi-tap. So multi-tap does like an incredible amount of functionality with the delays, but if you want to just come over here, put it into tape mode, and that would probably get you close to an ADT. You know, just if you look up kind of what the actual delay time was, it was probably a pretty fixed delay time. All right, we have Tiago checking in from Brazil. Great to see you on. All right, so DaVinci Girl asks, can someone write again when the server for the dongle is shut down? I'd like to look to make sure everything is all right. So it's going to be May 20th is the announced date. All right, wonderful to see Dave McKay on from Nashville. Greg, is there a setting or preference to see real-time updates in the score editor while recording and punching it in? It seems to overwrite everything previously invisible. So I think you just need to come over to just jump to a different project. All right, so we'll just come over here. Let's say we want to. Okay, so let's just come over here. I'll just do a quick recording. Just not hit 2 notes at once, sorry. All right, so let's say we have that lovely recording and we look at it in our score editor. Okay, so let's say we have that. So I think if you get to your transport, we could choose our MIDI record modes. So, and let's just choose replace. So now when I come over, that now the new recording is automatically put in and it replaces the existing recording. So try going to your transport and you could go to your MIDI record modes, and instead of merge or new parts would just kind of stack them on top. Try just choosing replace. So let me know if that does the trick for you. And great to see you on the live stream, Dave. Dave's based out in Nashville. All right, so you see SQ Nation just says, thank you so much. That was a great help. Thanks again, Greg. You're welcome. All right, my chat field just jumped. All right, so you see DaVinci Girl just says, I do not like to upgrade to newer version of Steinberg. I like to be compatible to my Windows 7 system I run besides. No, pretty soon Windows 10 won't be supported, but Windows 7, but you know, you can, that's your choice. All right. All right, Flyv asks, I found out something the other day I forgot about. That is, what does the freeze MIDI modifiers do? Something with MIDI inserts, I believe. All right, so when we have something that's, let's just come over here. I think I may have. All right, so let's say if I'm here, I have a synth bass part. And I'm going to put a MIDI effect on it so that when I play a chord, it will do an arpeggiation for me. So we will come over here. Let's go to the MIDI inserts. Let's go to... So now I hold a chord down, and I'll just open this up so that we could... So I'm just going to hold 3 notes down on my virtual keyboard, which you get access from hitting Alt or Option plus K. So you can... All right, so now when I go to record something on the bass part here, we'll just say, okay. Okay, so now we've recorded single notes. Now these single kind of longer notes will play through the arpeggiator. So we look at these particular notes. Just come right over here. Just get rid of this so I can see it a little better. Okay, so now these particular notes are running through the arpeggiator plugin. So as we look at this, the chords are now running through. So if I want to see the result of this particular plugin in the event, that's when we would go to MIDI and choose the freeze MIDI modifiers. Then the resulting action of this process, this MIDI plugin, is now reflected in the actual part. So now it's just chords that are being run through that. And as we do this, we'll go through your MIDI, freeze MIDI modifiers, and it's smart enough to automatically, when you select a track and we look at the MIDI inserts, that the MIDI insert is turned off so that the arpeggiation is not arpeggiating upon itself. So that's what the freeze MIDI modifiers does. Okay. All right, Dean Garvey Jazz asks, will Cubase 15 Pro require Windows 11? So I don't know, I mean, Cubase 14 has been out for less than 6 months, so it's too early to know because Cubase 15 hasn't been announced. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girl, it says I have an account, but I can't log into the account because no internet where I used a dongle. So yeah, you don't need the account if you're using the dongle, but if you don't have internet access, your Cubase on the Steinberg licensing system will still work. All right, so we see from Guitar Wisdoms, just saying, oh my G, that's it. I knew it had to be there somewhere. Thanks, Greg. You're awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today, and hopefully we can all learn more Cubase tips and tricks together. All right, produced by Soki asks, thanks for the response, Greg. That's helpful for sure. Any chance that we can correctly import BPM metadata from MP3s or waves when importing? So if those files, if that metadata is within the file itself, it will automatically be imported. It's not going to automatically do a tempo detection. You could do a tempo detection of it manually and apply that to the file, just like when we did the, when we do, let's see if we're back to here. So like on this particular, if we have a song that's been imported, let me see if we still have that project open. Yeah. So when we go to do a tempo detection of a file, we can have that metadata. So it's not going to automatically do it if the metadata is in the file. I'm going to clear my throat. If the metadata is in the file, it will automatically be imported. If it's something that doesn't have metadata, you could just come over to, again, go to the project, to tempo detection. So we go to the tempo track, to tempo detection. All right, let me just take it out of musical mode. So project, to tempo track, to tempo detection. And now we'll do the tempo detection. If we wanted to embed that metadata within the file, at that point we could just go to your audio, and you'd see advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo, and then here we could write the definition to the audio file, and that will automatically be read and and that metadata will automatically be recognized by Cubase. But if the the metadata is in a file, then Cubase will read it. So. All right, FlyV asks a question. Says in our quick question, Greg, how in Render in Place do I make it remove the source file? All right, so let's say I have this bass part here. Let's say we listen to this bass part and we want to remove. So the trick is when we do a render in place, the render in place could be either for the track or for the event, depending on what is selected. So if no event is selected, we'll select the track. So if we want to remove the track, when we select the track here, we just now come over and we go to render in place. All right, we go to the render settings and we say source tracks. Here we will get the option to disable the source tracks or to remove the source tracks. Now, if the event is selected, because we could have, so let's say if we come over here and we have multiple events, if an event is selected and we go to render in place, we could just keep the source events unchanged or mute source events, because we don't want to erase events that aren't selected. But if the entire track is selected, so we'll go ahead and close this. Now no events are selected, the track is selected, and we go to render in place. So we'll come over here. Then we could remove the source tracks. So we just say render, we'll see it rendered, and then the MIDI tracks are deleted. Now another thing that we could do that's pretty clever is if we want the MIDI tracks there in case we want to edit it and change it, because it could be so easy to do in the MIDI domain as opposed to audio. If you go to your render settings, we could say we want to disable the tracks and hide the source track. So this track, when we get to our visibility tab, we can see that this track, bass guitar. So now I'm going to disable the tracks so they're not taking additional CPU resources or memory resources. And then I could choose to hide them. So we're going to disable them. So in essence, it looks the same, but if we needed to fix that MIDI, we can now just come over here and choose to only hide the MIDI tracks and keep the audio completely intact. So make sure that you have the track selected as opposed to the event, because there's always the possibility that multiple events could be on the track, and we don't want to delete that if you only have one particular event selected. All right, wonderful to see Balsa from Montenegro, I believe, if my memory serves. It says, hi Greg, in MIDI editor, how to toggle multiple mute, unmute notes except for the ones that are selected. I assume it needs to be a logical editor preset and then assign a keyboard shortcut. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so okay, how to toggle mute, unmute all notes except the ones that are selected. So I think if we come over, is it Control M? No. Let's just try. All right, so if you want to come over, so one is if they are selected and you wanted to mute the notes, you could just hit Alt or Option plus M. But let's say if you want to So unmute all notes except the one that are selected. So let's say if we come over here, these notes are muted. And let me just say, okay, these ones here, if I hit Alt M, we could, so Alt or Option plus M. So this way you could toggle the status of the muted notes just with that particular keyboard shortcut. And if we wanted, so let me just reread it to make sure. Okay, how to toggle mute, unmute all notes except for the ones that are selected. And if we wanted to do this, let's say in a logical editor, okay, so let's do it in a logical editor. So we'll set it up, and we'll say we'll have some. Okay, so we want to transform notes, and let's say we want to and let's say that their property is set to is selected. Okay, so let's see if we remove that. So say let me just look over here. So let's say so I think that we may have to now couple this with the mute unmute and make it into a macro. So let me remove this. So let's say but I think really, let me know, try also just to come over here and see if we, and let's just see if we could, so if we want to come here, let's I think we could try it with a macro. So let's get to your key command. So let's do an invert. Invert selection. Let's add that command. And let's come over here. Mute, unmute objects. So let's add that command. So I have these selected. So now if I come over here, all the other notes will be muted like that. So if we come, I could select these particular notes and we could run the macro. So let me know if that works. And then if we want to duplicate, let me just duplicate this macro. And if we take the invert out, we could come over. remove that. So now we can so let's say, okay, so now these are selected notes. We can come here, then those, and then if we want to do the opposite, we could set up a logical editor to select notes where they are muted. Okay. Open up the key commands again. So let's add that command there. I'll move it up. All right, so if I did this right, let's come over. So we have these notes. I want the notes are selected. I want every other note to be muted that aren't selected. And then let's see if we do the opposite. All right, let's try this one more time. So let's do, we have the first step here. All right, let's see if I just select that. So give that a try and let me know if that would work for you to try those two, to try that. If not, I could work on it a little more. Okay. All right, Theory Super IN asks, many thanks for helping out. One more question, please. Got an M-Audio MIDI keyboard. It always sends modulation, volume change, and transpose randomly when I play. Is there a way to filter those, please? Yeah, sometimes it seems like a lot of those keyboards from that company can, like, the board stop. So if you want to filter out those notes, what you could do is, if you go to your preferences or settings, we'll go to usually the transpose may be set, but let's come over here. So let's say we want to go to MIDI filter. So here we could choose probably I'm not sure if the transpose is actual MIDI message, but you could say, okay, I want to filter out recording and throughput, and we'll say, okay, I want this to be let's say modulation data, we could add that. We want to go through MIDI CC7, and we could add that. And it could be, I'm not sure, you could, maybe if you hit the transpose key, you know, that usually isn't a specific MIDI message. It's kind of just internal control for the controller, so I don't think that we could filter that. But again, if you go to your preferences or settings, to MIDI filter, you could just come over here and choose to filter out on controller, and you could just filter out like your modulation and main volume wheel. A lot of times what happens is like the pitch bend wheel is a common culprit as well. So the pitch bend wheel is kind of always on a little bit, so it's super annoying. So you could just come over here and filter out pitch bend data. But MIDI control is just kind of like an internal message for the controller of what it's doing, so we can't necessarily filter that out since it's being sent internally to the controller, and then the keys are and the transposition happens on the keys that you press. So, and the MIDI message is the notes that you press and transmit, as opposed to like a transpose function. But that should help you with that. So let me just remove those so I can record that information later. But that's a filter way. All right, so we see from Synths, please teach some advanced trick to mastering Cubase. So I'm not sure if maybe if you could specify if you want to be for mastering in Cubase or just mastering Cubase, like learning Cubase well. I would say that if you were going to do like mastering, let me just come with a project. So it was like mastering to like enhance the audio. You know, there's Wavelab is obviously, you know, a super amazing program for that. That's really kind of designed for mastering, but let's just jump. I think I have a file I could use. Alright, so say I want to take this. So if I was to do something, some processing. So if we're going to do processing on this. So a lot of times kind of dynamics plugins are really good. So like Squasher is really quite good. And I'd say let's say we'll just give a little more gain. Let's add a little bit of stereo width. if you want to get like surgical with EQ, use like the frequency EQ. So you can take kind of a track from there. If you want to do some mastering, you could use plugins like the multiband compressor, frequency, stereo enhancer, squasher, stuff like that. That would be great choices. But if you want to learn how to master Cubase as a tool, you know, the live streams are great and there's wonderful YouTube resources available. All right, Balsa asks, hi Greg, is it possible to slice the sample in a sampler track and use the pattern editor to create rhythms from those slices? Let's take a look. So let's add sampler track and we'll do it as a pattern event. Okay, so let's come over, let's just tempo down a bit.
Yeah. Bling.
Okay, so let's say we have this as our file, or I'll just drag this into sampler track. Okay, so now I want to be able to, let's create slices. So we'll turn this on. We could adjust kind of our threshold here. So let's say, okay, we want to do, so we could adjust kind of the transient. So now once we've done this, we can and let's get to the editor now. I'm just going to actually put it into this sampler track, sorry. So this is the sampler track we created. All right, let's just start the process over again. All right, so I'm going to start fresh. Let me start from scratch here, sorry. All right, so let's come back to our sampler control. And see if we could do this. Let's create slices. All right, so say now we're playing this, and I'll just kind of erase this. Let's So you could do stuff like that as well, but you know, with this, another method that may also be good is maybe not from the sampler track, but if we go to an instrument track and let's add Groove Agent SE, let's turn this into a pattern event. I'll take
kinda love it, kinda crazy, kinda stupid, cause I'm in the deep end.
All right, and now I could just do this within Groove Agent SE. We'll come over here, slice, and then we'll create our slices. And now each of these, we can now come over and program directly inside of, so. And now at this point, if we wanted to come right over, let's say we're starting at C1, I'll just add some more notes chromatically here, and so now you could just do like sampler tracks, like the pattern editor, and just have it trigger your different keys. So if we want to put in so let's say we want to put in D2, so now we can come over and let's say we want this to be 30-second notes. And as we select this, we can increase their velocity. So so that way you could do all sorts of creative sample chops using the pattern editor and employing it with either sampler track or Groove Agent. All right, Quellin asks, hello Greg, since I upgraded to Cubase 14 Pro last week, I found out that Spectral Layers 1 is not shown in the ARA section. Is this a bug of the latest version? I installed Cubase 14 last week, so with Cubase 14 you might have to go, because I think you get the Spectral Layers. So let's come over. You may have to install the latest. Spectral Layers 1 was for the previous, it was for Cubase 13, and now I think it's, so make sure you go to the Steinberg download assistant and you download the latest Spectral Layers. I think it's called Spectral Layers Go. Hang on one second. sorry about that. Yeah, so go to the Spectral Layers 11.06 and choose to install, because I think you get the Spectral Layers Go with Cubase 14 as opposed to the Spectral Layers 1. So make sure that you actually re-download and install that from the Cubase 14 section. Sorry about having to take the call. All right, so we see from Yop, hi Greg, how can I record the modulators data as automation in Cubase 14 Pro? Greetings from Switzerland. So the modulation data is intended not to, not to be re-recorded as automation, or the modulators are supposed to kind of be functioning more in real time. So as we want to come over to the event, so, the basis of this is that, everyone complained for years that they couldn't, just come over very easily and, have the effects of kind of like your automation. So let's say if we come over to this, say if we put in our sine wave, that, instead of having to see the like the LFOs and the modulation in the actual event, that the modulators would actually just, would basically automate the parameters, but not write that particular parameter as back as modulation. So if we come over and say, okay, we want to, that these are just going to be kind of written and played back in real time, but not re-recorded back into the track. These can be, automated. So if you wanted to, like while you're playing, so if we wanted to, let me just undo all the solos. So as we want to kind of go back, there's, you could choose to automate the modulators, but it's not going to write the automation in for the parameter. So the design intention is that this runs as a separate layer, and you could still have automation going on as well. So. All right, so we see from DJFK, just says great delay. Wonderful to see Gareth on from Bilbao, Spain. All right, Quellen asks, in Cubase I can deactivate audio and instrumental channels, but why can I not deactivate effects channels? I was building a template and I found out that I cannot deactivate effects. If it's VST3 plugins, and if we come over to, if we come over to your settings and just go to VST to plugins, and we choose there's suspend VST3 processing when no audio signals are present. So if there's no audio that's going to the VST3 plugins, it's not taking any processing power. So if there's no audio that's being sent to the effects channel, it's not going to take any processing power once you have that preference enabled. So again, just come over here to your preferences or settings and go to VST plugins, and then suspend VST3 plugin processing when no audio signals are received. So. All right, Rishab Saxena asks, in Pattern Editor, when I change the step resolution after writing notes, the existing notes gets messed up. Is this a bug or designed that way? All right, so let's come over. All right, so let's go to our editor here. Just and I'll just do new pattern. Okay, so let's say I will. All right, so let's say I now want to put in, we'll put in hi-hats here. All right, so now I think if we just come over here, if we just come over here, we could say in right click, we could double step resolution of the step lane. So now when I do that, we still have the same exact sounds, and we could just now throw in like 30-second notes. So if it's just gonna, if it's a matter of doubling, try just to right click, and then you could double the length of patterns, just kind of right there, and still have the same resolution. And that was added in 1402. Otherwise, in previous versions, if I would have taken that, so let's come over here, and now we can undo. So if I come over here and I change the resolution to 30-second notes, it does that. But now again, right clicking, we could double the step resolution of the step lane, and now we could still throw in some. So try right clicking, and then you get some additional options that weren't in the initial release of 14. Garrett says he loves his beer on multi-tap. All right, my chat field jumped to me, so let me find my spot. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, Balsa asks, hi Greg, how to have two different reverb sends but have them mono, one panned left, one panned right. Okay, so we can do this, we'll show you. All right, I'm just gonna look. Okay, so I want to have two different reverbs. Okay, and this is kind of a classic Phil Ramone trick. All right, so I'm going to take off the delay here. All right, so let me just come over. Let's add two plate reverbs. Okay, so I'm going to just add two effect sends. We'll call these, we'll go to our reverb. We'll go to all right, but let me make those mono. Sorry about that. try a different project here real quick. Okay, so let's say we have our vocal, and we put on 2 mono reverbs. Let's take our existing reverb off. Let's check my audio connections here real quick. Okay, so let me just add 2 effects tracks, and we'll make them mono. Now we're on a slightly longer plate on it. Okay, so now let's go to our track.
Something's wrong. We can't go on.
All right. And we'll say, okay, let's go to reverence and reverence here. So our 2 different ones.
Tell me why something's wrong. Tell me why something's wrong. We can't go on living a lie. How can I feel you? How can I see you? You run high from the light. Be someone tonight.
So we could kind of create our 2 sends there, and when we go, we could look at, or another method to do this. So if we wanted to just take our stereo, so let's say if we come over, let's make these stereo tracks now.
Tell me why something's wrong. We can't go on.
And when we go to our return channels, we could have these panned, like all the way to the, let's say, to the left channel, and now all the way to the right channel for the reverbs.
Tell me why something's wrong. We can't go on.
So when we
Living a lie.
have this, so let's say we have no reverb.
How can I feel?
That's only reverb in the right channel. And this is only reverb in the left channel.
You're running high from the
Now we could also, once we have this set, we can go to the panning. And we can say, okay, let's get to the right. You could also pan the effects end. But this way we could have two different mono reverbs. And you could just go to the sends. So we're only hearing. So if I want the reverb only in the left, I use this send. I hear this only in the right. And that's because each of these effects are panned accordingly, just like that. So give that a try. All right, so you see Quellen. Let me see if it's a continuation. Okay, it's about the effects. All right. All right, so we see from DJFK, that's amazing, made my day. Thanks, Jazz Dude and Greg. You're welcome. All right. Let me see from Dave McKay, it says perfect, thank you. All right. I see Parabot 2 says, thanks, Greg. The multi-tap delay is amazing. Gareth is saying he loves the new version. It's wonderful, beautiful, stunning. Let's see. So Jazz Dude just mentioning the play speed for the automatic double tracking ADT. It's about 100 milliseconds delay because there's 19 centimeters difference in space between the two heads. All right, wonderful to see Cornell checking in from the Netherlands. Thanks for joining us. All right, Balsa asks, hi Greg, any tips to select a track when the height is minimum? Right-clicking opens automation or record, listen, mute, or name, and everything but select the track. All right, so let's just add. All right, so say if I'm here, so this seems to work, just kind of clicking on the right hand side of it, or even just clicking on the name field. We know that that's, if we double click, we can choose to rename. But if we just click on the name field once, that will select a track and not activate other parameters. So let me know if that makes sense for your scenario. All right, Balsa asks, hi Greg, in VariAudio, when using a reference MIDI track, is it possible to move it up or down in octaves so that the reference notes are on the same octave as the VariAudio notes? So there isn't a way that I know of to change that, because the intention is really to show you, so if you're not familiar with this feature, we could go to VariAudio here. Activate the project. So when we're in VariAudio, we could now just make this full screen so we could use like a MIDI reference. So let's say if we want to use the piano track, that we could see the particular notes of the piano that are being employed. So there I don't know of a way to adjust the octave resolution. I guess you could choose to, if we take our MIDI notes here and let's make a track version, so if we do a new track version, or let's duplicate the track version, and then we select all, hold down shift and the up arrows, and now when we go to look at VariAudio, it's now an octave higher just on that. So you could do it like that, but the intention was that you could actually also see the pitch of the piano, not just a reference. So I think it could throw people off if you are seeing notes that are a different pitch than the actual VariAudio segments. But if you needed to do that, you could try to just duplicate, create a track version, and then go back to your existing track without any consequences. So you can give that a try. So we see from Cornell, just says, wow, this is useful. I always record the MIDI from the ARP to another MIDI track. This is faster. Yeah, and if one of the things that you could do, with and I guess is with the freeze MIDI modifiers, if you wanted to have all those parts, so you could print it out and for different functions like that. If we come here, if we just activate the line, and this changed, I think, in Cubase 13. But if we come here, let's go to like our synth bass part. So now I will turn on the MIDI inserts. And let's go to the Apache. So now if we move this line, we see this white line here. I could just place this. So as I record, now it's actually recorded the output of the MIDI plugin directly into the event itself. So just moving in the MIDI inserts, we'll see this little line. We could put that at the top. And now we can just kind of move that down, and that plugin will be recorded into the actual part. All right, we see Gareth is happy to see Brian Sawyer's Senior on. All right, we see Gareth is saying Mike is up in the air right now, so maybe Gareth will have to do virtual ice cream distribution for Michael Teams. Gareth is saying he's blissfully happy with the new licensing system. That's great. We see Michael Teams is going to be in Barcelona on Saturday, but Gareth probably won't be able to meet up with him. I hope he has a wonderful time. All right, so we see produced by Soki. Says the issue I have is when I import songs to BPM metadata embedded in MP3, from which other software can see, like Serato, but Cubase won't. I assume it's because MP3 is converted to WAV. So anytime that you take an MP3 into an editing environment, anytime that, like typically most DAWs would be in editing, you can't really edit MP3s like a WAV file. So that would automatically be carried over. But I think, I would have to check, but maybe if the MP3, if the original metadata was part of the WAV file, that might get carried over to the MP3. But if it's in the file itself, then, Cubase will be able to read it. All right, so Brian Sawyer is just saying, are we doing Zoom today? I was thinking we would just do kind of a full live stream since I missed the last 5 for corporate meetings and vacation. So I know I have a lot of questions to get through. So we'll probably put it off this month and get it back for May. We see Jazz Dude sharing photos of echoplexes and how to use different heads. Or you see Flyv just says, nice, thanks for helping me get that trick out. You select the track. So. All right, Balsa asks, hi Greg, I have an audio part with 3 rows in it for kick, snare, hi-hat. Is it possible to send each row to its dedicated output? You would need to split the file. Each track could have a dedicated, if each track would have its own output routing. Now the output routing, depending on the file, so let's say if I have a multi-channel file here. Let me just think I have one I could import. All right, so now this track is an interlead file. So if we were to kind of look at the file, so we can see this is like a 5.1 file, and I don't have 5.1 monitoring for anyone to hear, but what we could do, so let's say, so we can see that we have 6 channels of information in one audio file. So this is an interleaved file. So what we could do in this case is if we create an audio output, but this wouldn't necessarily go to like a stereo output. So if we go to your audio connections, we could go to an output here. If you're still sending out of a stereo, this may not work, but we could add a bus. So we want to add a 5.1 bus. And now we could take this track and route it to, instead of the stereo out, to the 5.1 bus. If you wanted to take like your kick, snare, hi-hat and send it to different tracks, but a stereo output, you would go to the project menu and choose convert tracks, and you'd say multi-channel to mono, and we say, okay, I want to take the selected tracks. We could keep the source tracks, and then we could hit OK, and this would automatically split the multi-channel files into independent mono files. So probably the easiest way is to take if you have 3 audio tracks. Now, when you say an audio part, I'm not sure if those are discrete channels or if you have those all together, but if they're discrete channels, you could select it. Project menu to convert tracks, and then you say multi-channel to mono, and then this way you could take your 3-channel, or in this case a 5.1 channel, and then convert it to the independent mono sources like that. All right, Cornell just asking everyone to kindly obliterate the like button. Jazz Dude wants everyone to check out all the great plugins that come with Cubase and one, two that he mentioned for kind of making things sound a bit more like analog for distortion. That shouldn't be overlooked. Quadrifuzz is a great one. It's a multi-band distortion. And then we also have under distortion, another classic is going to be the Grungelizer. So here we could add hum and noise to your particular tracks as well. So great plugins to kind of make more vintage vibes with your digital sound. All right, so Marcus Strymon asks, hey Greg, what's the difference between the Maximizer and the Razor? I used to go Maximizer only, but it seems Razor can do more LUFS without touching anything. The Maximizer works a lot more. So, they're kind of just different concepts, so one, they're going to kind of bring up gain, but when we go, so let's say if we go to the Maximizer, and I'll just do it on, let's see, we still have the project open. Here, I'll just put that Asana wedding. So they could both make your tracks louder, but when we this would be more kind of traditional kind of loudness gain, and there's a modern algorithm. And if we're good to Squasher, I would say Squasher's more kind of like a typical, one, it's multi-band, but it's also kind of your up-down. So, like if you're doing like a lot of dance, I would say if you're doing a lot of dance type projects, that this is really kind of similar results. Just the, when we look at the Squasher, that's obviously multi-band so that we could deal with different frequencies. But, a lot of people would compare, it's in like an up-down compressor, people often call it. So, if you want to get, that type of, so both of them can make your projects louder. So, but different flavors, like different delays, different reverbs, to accomplish kind of the same goal. So, but you have all the different flavors to work with. Okay. All right, so you see Gareth just says, hope you had a great break and the kickoff was useful. So yeah, it was great to see all my colleagues and vacation was wonderful. All right. Michael Pierce, wonderful to see you on. Said, hoping everyone had a nice Easter break. Great to see you, Michael. All right, James Daly asks, how do you put your channel to the left of your project window like you have? So this came in 12 or 13, where we could have kind of the inspector, all of the channel settings for the inspector on the left-hand side. And if we go to the upper right-hand corner, we can turn on kind of the traditional inspector. And if we want to see all of the audio characteristics of an audio track or an instrument track, we could just click right here, just so we could have kind of two inspectors on the left-hand side, just like that. So go to the upper right-hand corner. If you have 12 or earlier, it may not work. I think that was introduced in 13, and obviously in 14. All right, so we see George saying hi from Germany. Hope you're well. Marcus Stryman also asks, and Greg, same goes to the in-house compressors. How do they behave differently when it comes to playing compression? Is it true that the vintage is faster attack than the tube? I think that the vintage is going to be a faster attack, but I haven't done analysis on it. But when you go to kind of I would say the black valve compressor is one a lot of fans as like a general compressor. So I think that was in 14. If we want to, so a lot of people, I know lots of people have just kind of migrated to using that as their compressor for everything. If you wanted to have for vocal, there's the Vox Comp is a very effective vocal compressor. And going into, I use a lot of just the standard compressor. I find this to be very effective as well. And if you want compressors with more character, then you could check out like the vintage compressor, and we could probably get a sense of what that one's kind of modeling, and also the tube compressor. But a lot of these, it's like, just kind of try different things, try different settings on different tracks, and see which flavor kind of makes sense for the particular track. So I try not to always, use, on bass, it's always this. On vocals, it's always this. It's nice to have go-tos, but I think sometimes it's easy to get stuck where people are utilizing the same tools constantly. So try different compressors and try it out. All right, Theory Suprayan asks, if you had a tom track that plays only on fills, is there a quick way to remove the part where the toms are not playing? Yeah, so let's take a look. All right, so let's say we want to kind of clean up some drums. And so, what you could do is let's come over here. Let's say, okay, we have our toms here. Okay, so let's say there's not a lot of tom activity. We may have other tracks that are kind of bleeding through. So if we're listening to Rack Tom 2, so what we could do in this case is if we go to your audio and to advanced, you'll see a detect silence. So this way we could set a threshold. We'll analyze and do process. And then as we do this, only the toms, only when the toms are coming in will it actually sound. So what we're doing is, so once again, go to audio and advanced and choose to detect silence, audio advanced, detect silence, and you can do it just like that. Okay, so we see Anthony Clark just says, hi Greg, how to transpose samples in the drum machine by semitones or octaves, and what is the minus 60 and 60 in the pitch section? Lastly, can we detect a kick sample or 808 pitch in the drum machine? All right, so just jump back to different project here. Okay, so we'll add drum track. All right, so let me just come here. So I don't think it's as easy as Groove Agent. So in the drum machine, I think it's going to be not where it's kind of treated more melodically. I'll show you in Groove Agent how this could be done. All right, so let me just add an instrument track, and we'll do Groove Agent SE. Okay, so now when I drag a sample into Groove Agent here, so let me just, what I could do is we'll just come over here to pitch, and we'll say, okay, I want the key range. We want to go from C1 through C2. So now, so we could kind of play this chromatically. So you could do it like very easily in Groove Agent. So I don't think that's a function that's in the drum machine. And our question was, but let's say if we go to the drum machine, like what is the 60 for that? So if we come over here, so let's say if we want to come over, let's go to our pitch envelope. Let me just, so I think that's just 60 semitones, like 5 octaves up and 5 octaves down. Now, if you want to, there isn't a way to detect the pitch within Groove Agent or within the particular sample. So let's say if we have kind of like a kick, let me just find. Something like that. So if we have, let's say our sample, if you want to figure out what kind of the actual pitch is of the sample, is, you know, one of the things you could do is just go into VariAudio and have it detect the pitch, and we could see right here that okay, that's probably going to be an A0 as the pitch. So now when we go into a sampler track or into the drum machine, we could just say, if we want it to be pitch wise, we can say let's add a drum track, and now I want this to be A1 or A0. I could just drag that pitch, that sample right to, you know, we know that that sample is going to be A0, and we could just drag right to A0. But there's nothing internally for pitch detection. And realize that, you know, the drum machine is its very first iteration, and just like a lot of Steinberg products, I'm sure we'll see the depth of it grow as newer versions come out. right. So Marcus Strymon just says, what's your go-to Cubase compressor for a master bus? With what purpose? I find a glue compression concept kind of weird, where people maybe gone with 30 milliseconds attack. So I try to, personally, I try to make my mix sound great without it may sound kind of, I try to make my mix sound great without a mix bus compressor. But let's say if I want to come here, I'll just revert this project. I think like, if I had to put one, I may do like Black Valve, depending on, like, it could really depend on what you want the compression to do. Do you want it to just kind of tame a couple of things? I see sometimes people stack multiple compressors on a track or on their master bus, and it's like, oh, this compressor is taking care of this one note, and this compressor is taking care of that note, this compressor is taking care of another note, but the compressors are kind of always still on and affecting the entire mix. So but let's say if I just want to take like this, and let's go to the mix, and I'll just throw a Black Valve on. So I would say Black Valve's kind of turned into my go-to compressor. So let's come over here. Like here, so like I probably would never do anything like that extreme on a master bus, but if you're doing a dance track, you may need to do that. So it's probably could be the projects that I kind of am involved with. But just to kind of give you an idea, like if you had to do like just a tiny bit of correction, give it some flavor, Black Valve would be a great place to start. So I think a lot of people really grown to appreciate that particular compressor. All right, so you see from George, Greg, how would you go about making example toms with preverb, easily add reverb, reverse, and make sure tom hits are in the correct place, timing? So let's come over and say I want to do like a preverb. So I think I understand. So let's say I want to add, let's say, to the snare. So add an effects track to the snare. So let's start with the reverence. We'll make it mono. All right, just seeing if we could, if you have the if you, one of the things that you could do is just load up an impulse. Like if you have an IR impulse, you could trim the impulse and kind of have the reverb start here. But let's just see, like, we go to our pre-delay settings here. So, you could experiment by editing the IR reverb and be able to kind of, maybe start with the reverb kind of already, like instead of starting right here, but maybe kind of start at a different spot in the impulse, and that could just be by importing the wave file. So you could kind of experiment with that. Also, once we have the reverb, so let's say if we want to come here and I'll just put on maybe a plate that's a little more. So right now, if I want to come over here, we could just say I want to export. So let's get a file, export audio mix down, and we could just say, okay, I want to export that instance of reverence, and we'll put it into the audio track. So now we just have, let's say we will turn off this reverb, and as we're playing our reverb with this rendered reverb. And now you could render that reverb, but have that reverb track play back earlier in time with the track delay. So, sorry, let me just set this correct. So I'm going to take this, and now we could do kind of like a pre-delay on the reverb that's been printed. So we'll go. So that might be, or just, physically just adjust the start position of the reverb and kind of blend with that. So there may be a couple of approaches to working with that. All right. All right, Robert Moyle asks, hi Greg, thanks for your expertise. Cubase 14 Pro on M2 Max Studio, the latest OS. I was exporting a mix that had automated mute on a VST track. It didn't work till I exported in live mode. Why? So I'll just try here. I'm not sure if maybe it's kind of systemic to a particular plugin. But I'll try it on this and see if we get it to work as expected. So let's say I want to just take the piano here. And I'll just So we'll just write in some automation here. All right, so we have some mute automation going on. So let's go ahead and export this track. Okay, and we will create an audio track from that. Let's try it one more time. Let me just. I'll just solo just a piano part. Let me make sure I'm putting it. You just take write mode off and try that, and see, I would think that it would, or read mode. Let's take write mode. Let me try that one more time. See if that makes any difference. Solo that. Try again. All right, so listen to this. You can see the automation. Try real time for, yeah, it doesn't seem like it's muting as expected. And see if we do real time export. So it seems like this is gonna work, but the other ones don't. But I'll make sure to report that. Sorry that you ran into that. I'll mention that. Okay. Michael Pierce is recommending the tube compressor on Tubus. Okay, reading through comments here. All right, wonderful to see Matt Elston on. See, Gareth is using the modulation features. It's great. All right, Salam YouTube says, I read about the video light color Light and color video. Could you show me, please, the light and colors? All right, so let's see. I don't think I've messed with it too much, or if it's... Alright, so it's... Or let me just take a look, so I'm not sure if it was... Maybe it's in preferences. Let me take a look. Or I'm not sure if maybe that's just a innuendo feature. Let me just look, see if that is in. See if it's... Alright, let me see if it's in here. I've been doing as much video work. Let me just see if it's in... Maybe it's in here. Okay, so if we go to the video files color space, and this could be in Cubase, that you could kind of set that there. Let me take a look, see what it is, if it's in Cubase in the same area, but that's... Yeah, so if you kind of click right over here, I don't know much like the differences are, but we could... Let's see if we could see a difference as we play back. We could do some more research, but if we come over here to your studio setup and go to the video player, you could... So that's where you could access it. I could do some more research if you want to send me an email, and I could hopefully have a better answer on Friday. Just live stream for that. All right. through comments here. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped to me. All right, so we see DaVinci Girl is just saying, is there a Zoom live stream today? So I think since we're with my vacation time and corporate kickoff, that we'll put it off this month. All right, so Cornell just asking a question about Zoom. Can someone join without using a cam and just mic only? So yeah, certainly, no problem. See Brian, so he says need Zoom. He says missed maybe the last 2 or 3 during his move. All right, so you see FlyV says my drum editor isn't showing up like yours with a drum map. What setting is that? So if you have a so one of the things that you can do, especially if you're using Groove Agent, that's really helpful. So let me just go to a different project. So show this. So let's say we have a drum kit here. We open up the instrument, we can see, okay, when we look at the instrument, that we have our names from Groove Agent are automatically the names that we see on the pads. But now what we can do when we go to Groove Agent and we look at the drum map, you could just come over here and create drum map from instrument with Groove Agent tracks. So if I added a brand new instrument, we go to Groove Agent SE, I'll load up a random kit. So let's say laser beams, come over here. So now when we go to our editor, and I had this kind of set up, let me just convert that to MIDI track here. So now when we go to the editor, we see like a normal MIDI key editor, but with this Groove Agent, what I can do now is where it says no drum map here in the routing tab, that we could just say create drum map from the instrument. And now when we double click on the event, all the sound names are carried over. So I can know that when we paint this in, it's going to be a closed hi-hat, and so that's automatically extracted from the Groove Agent instrument. So let me know if that's the drum editor that you're talking about, or if it was going back more to this editor, which is the pattern editor. So when you go to add tracks, you can add them as a pattern, or so when we go to add an instrument, we could switch these between a MIDI part or a pattern event. All right, FlyV asks, what button on a mouse is it to drag your screen? So if you hold down, so let's say if I have this and I want to move around in the project window, if you press and hold the scroll wheel down and move it while the scroll wheel is being held down, you can navigate kind of the project right there. So this way you could just kind of take the whole project and navigate up or down or earlier or later in time. So let me know if that's what you're doing. All right, wonderful to see Pastoral Apologetics checking in from Southeast Texas. This is my brother who called the middle of the live stream from Houston just a little while ago. All right, Mega Ultra says, hey bro, are you teaching how to make better vocals? Is this similar in FL Studio? Does he have a delay? And he's also just saying, but is he on YouTube or in another dimension? So yeah, sometimes the questions show up. But if you wanted to make, great vocals, you could obviously do that inside of Cubase. So let's say if we want, we'll just come over here. Just take my friend Wayne Estes project that he lent to me. So let's say if we want to take, there's a couple of different approaches. So let's say if I want to just kind of like work on vocals, one of the great things that we could do is come over and I'll just bypass all of my sends and inserts on this particular track. So
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago. It was 7th grade in the school parking lot.
But if you want to have kind of like all of your processing,
do you recall
one of the plugins that we can do is I'm going to make this into like processing for a stereo track. And I could just come over here to like my inserts.
Waiting on our yellow coach.
And we can go to our vocal chain. So let's say, okay, I want to come over and put
your heart
delay.
Through. It caught my breath while you called me to.
And let's make this maybe like a quarter note delay.
Now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
Let's put a little reverb on.
Oh, I remember the day that we wed. Seems like a long, long time ago.
And we could also send that reverb.
Kiss, there was no regret right after that Garth Brooks show. You told your daddy and he called.
And let's come over and say, okay, I want to do like a low cut
for any boy that dumb.
So we could just kind of come over here.
Soured words are now dead and
dumb. Let's put noise gate on.
Long time ago.
Let's come over. Let's apply some pitch correction
now
if you wanted to.
But
we could also just say, okay, let's.
With kids of their own.
Yeah, let's go to like
now
our
I know
EQ.
Your dad's pretty happy now, 'cause what began as our first kiss, it started all.
If we wanted
to
put like even an exciter on it, we could come over here.
Do you remember the day that we met? It was a long time ago.
Compressor here.
And I still love you like the day that we met. Oh, a long, long time ago.
So now just kind of taking one particular plugin, we could just go from.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long,
all these processes
time ago.
Will be just right in.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through.
And listen
It
to that in
caught
context.
my breath while you called me to.
If we're to kind of bypass all the lead vocal.
Well, even now I'm so in love with you. Just like a long, long time ago. Oh, I remember the day that we went. Seems like a long, long time ago.
So one plugin, you can make just a tremendous amount of difference in the quality of vocal processing without having to have loads of different plugins available. All right, so you see from Mega Ultra, is there any reason why there's a delay of 20 minutes, or is it because he takes time explaining certain things? So yeah, answering questions takes longer than asking them. All right, great to see Rick from Batman Studios. Says, saying, miss you last few weeks. Glad you had a great vacation in Hawaii. I'll be there in September. So yeah, let me know which island you're going to. It's always magical. So, all right, Artist Knows Love wants people to hit the like button. All right, you see Mega Ultra is asking if I'm the creator of Cubase. I've been running it for a long time, but there's a lot of really smart people in Germany. Great team of engineers, which makes my job look easy. All right, we have Boungaunga, the Sound Monster, saying hello to the Cubase Live team. All right, and we see Jay from Secret Studios. Wonderful to see you on. All right, so we see from Crooked Creek Studios, multiple files or one project with folders with the individual tracks info. So, you know, if you're asking like which is kind of the better mechanism for project file management, like when you start a project, you'd come over here. Let's say you'll see this little prompt for project location. Think of every project as being in a unique folder. And this way you could back up one folder and all the content in that particular project. So if I was doing a new project, we would do here, I could start off with create empty or use a template. So I choose the folder, and then when I hit open, anytime I record audio or when I go to save a project at this point, it would automatically be placed into the project folder that we just defined. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, Boungaunga, the Sound Monster asks, I've always wanted to ask this. Is it possible in Cubase to start a beat, record vocals, mix all the sounds, vocals, and export the final project all in one project? Certainly. Yeah, people do it all the time where you have complete projects. So if you want to make beats, whatever function that you want to do. So even if you want to come over, there's tons of great particular projects that, so the full gamut of, from inception to delivery can all be done directly in Cubase. All right. All right, so we have Electric, Dewey's Beats. Hey, Greg, is it possible to play this snap to input function without enabling the record function in the MIDI editor? It's annoying. I always had to push the record in editor button. right, so see, so is it possible to play the snap to input function, enabling record function in the MIDI editor? So if you're, so let's say if we want to come here, I'll just quickly do new project. All right, so let's just add like a groove agent here. All right, so I'll just switch this over to MIDI part. Okay, so let's say if I'm here, all right, and let's say if I'm just recording, I'm not sure if you're doing like a cycle record, like building a beat kind of thing, but let's say if I'm here, all right, and I want to so there I didn't enable the record in the MIDI editor, so it shows up after you stop if you don't turn that on. And if you wanted to snap to input, if you just enable the auto quantize, this way we could just quantize on input. And that is independent of the record in the MIDI editor function. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. You see kind of further clarification from Crooked Creek Studios. I think Michael Pierce was indicating it was about the folders question. It says I tend to start with track 1, sort out, create a template, assuming that's appropriate, then start each new song starting with the template. And Crooked Creek Studios just says I do that for drum tracking, but when I start adding other instruments, I make track presets for consistency. I read that some people create albums in one project using folders. So what I would do, is each song could be, like, let's say we have one album, one folder is the album, and then each song within that album is its own unique folder. It just makes kind of backup and archival easy, so you can move one folder, that's the album, or you could archive individual songs. I used to see when sequencers used to synchronize to an analog tape machine or to an ADAT, where people would have one project per tape. So wherever you were in the tape, people would just have like song 1, song 2, song 3, just wherever it was in tape, so that you didn't have to do offsets and synchronize, to synchronize to wherever the tape started playing was where the sequence was, and you could do different tempo tracks. I think currently most people aren't working that way because of, they're not synchronizing to a reel of tape. So I would suggest, each individual song in its unique folder, and each of those song folders in an album folder. I think that's probably the best practice, most practical. All right, FlyV just says, last question of the day. You can ask as many questions as you want. What do these sections of audio connections do? Group effect, external effects, external instruments. All right, so when we go to your audio connections in your studio, you can hit F4 to open that up. So we see groups. So when we do this, we can add an effect track. So I can say, okay, when we do this, I want to add a reverence. I want to add a reverb, and I want to add a delay. So we'll come over here. Let's get to studio delay. Okay, so we now have those. Now I'm always going to be working with a vocal group. And I always want, let's say, a drum group. So now what we could do is, instead of adding these tracks, I can store them right here. So let's say drums. And these tracks are now being added. So it just allows us to add group or effects tracks from here. And if we're utilizing an external effect, like, okay, I want to go out to my lexicon reverb, we could take inputs and outputs, and the same with external instruments, where if I have like a Yamaha montage and I wanted to bring in the montage use my Cubase plugins, I could connect it as an external instrument or external effects. I would take the audio ins and outs for an external effects and the audio inputs for external instruments, so that the audio can be played in Cubase, go out through your audio interface into the external effects unit, and then the audio is processed there and then brought back into Cubase. So that's what the external effects will allow you to use, like compressors or reverbs from other hardware-based instruments, or hardware-based effects, or hardware-based instruments, and utilize those and bring it into your Cubase environment for automation and internal effect, like VST effect, software effect processing. All right, so we see Marcus, I guess I messed up. So it says, Greg, I was wondering about maximizer and limiter versus razor, not squasher. All right, so let's take a look at that quick track. Sorry about that. Just a sample rate here. All right, so let's open up the maximizer. Let's go to the razor. And what the razor is going to be good for is kind of intersample. So sometimes you may have like peaks that are kind of in between the samples. So let's say we want to. So one of the things that's going to be is when you come over here is the intersample clipping. So that's something that the maximizer is not going to allow you to do. So if there is a clip in the audio in between the samples, so that's kind of one of the unique aspects of the razor. So when you use the DIC mode right here, so that will detect the intersample clipping and be able to handle that. So, and then you'll have different choices here as well. So, but kind of play with it and see which flavor you like. All right. All right, wonderful to see Pablo on. Great to see you on. All right, reading through comments here. Pablo just says, welcome back to me. So it's good to be back. Missed doing the live streams while I was on vacation. All right, so we have Arcal 773 from Chicago, just upgraded to 14 Pro. It says it's fun to run with the big dogs. Hang on one second. I have another call. I have another call coming in here. Hang on. All right. All right, so we see Gareth just asking Pablo and I if we're okay for send audio wave and a CPR file for markers regions. So yeah, that's fine for me. All right, so we have Claudio Donzelli saying hi from Berlin. Thanks for joining us. All right, reading through questions. All right, so we see Anthony Clark says, thanks, Greg, and our question, how to set two samples in either drum machine or groove agent to cut itself when playing at the same time in case it's closed and open hi-hat. All right, so I think we can do it in groove agent. Let's see if I remember where to do it. So. so let me just... All right, so I think if we... I know there's a way to do it, but let's say if we come here... All right, so maybe it's the exclusive. So let's say if we put this to exclusive 1 and exclusive 1 here. We just try with maybe a cymbal crash so it's a little more apparent. Okay, so now we put this into pad exclusive group 1. So let's say so now that cymbal cuts off as soon as the hi-hat. So select the samples that you want to kind of, you know, not have play at once, and then put it into this exclusive group. So you could have multiple exclusive groups, but that way, if you want that to automatically cut off as soon as there's another note for hi-hats, you could do stuff like that. All right, so we see George says, okay, wrong wording. I meant reverse reverb. So snare, add reverb, export, reverse the effects reverb, then make sure that the reverse reverb ends exactly where the snare hits in time. So how I always kind of work with reverse reverbs. Let me just get... try a different preset. Okay, so let's say now I want to take this out of output 2. So when we come here to our, we have our reverb. So I think it's a little easier, an easier approach could be, so let's say we come here and we're going to have just, let's say just our, we'll have some bleeding through, but let's say, now I want to come over here, let's add, so if you want to do like a reverse reverb, just come here, let's add an effects channel. So let's go to our reverence. All right, and we'll just get to like a plate. And then within reverence, you could just come right over here and reverse. And you could, let's see if we adjust the pre-delay time. So that way you could take kind of your and we go up to, so you can play around with that, and if you're working with like shorter hauls, you could just say you could have your reverb. Yeah, if you have an impulse, you could have that timed. So, get the time of the reverb and drop. If you render the reverb in, at that point, you could just do the reverse reverb directly from within Reverence. So check that out and play with the reverse functionality there, and that will probably get you there pretty quickly. All right. All right, we see Vincent on. Great to see you on. All right, just see question: how did he do that marker shortcut? If you remind me what marker it was about 45 minutes ago. All right, so I found my spot. All right, so Vincent asks, in Cubase 12, we seem to seamlessly be able to undo, redo plugin parameter changes. Now in 14, it seems like it's irregular. For example, it does not work at all with Pro Q3, known error. So, I don't have a license at Pro Q3, but let's say if I come over here and I open up, let's say a third-party plugin here. Let's see. I move the parameters around. That I could hit Alt or Option plus Z and redo all the functions. So if we open this up, in Alt or Option plus Shift plus Z allows us to undo and redo your functions. So I'm not sure if there's anything particular with Pro Q3, but it seems to work as expected with all the internal plugins and just a random third-party plugin. So let's see, Vince just says, switch between pattern and MIDI. Nice. All right. All right, so we see Vincent just saying just talking about this with different plugins. It says I added Magneto 2, changed the saturation of the plugin, pressed Option Z, and the Magneto plugin is now removed from the inserts. All right, so let me try with Magneto here. So we'll just open it up as an insert. So let's come over here, distortion. All right, and we get the same parameters. Let's change the saturation. All right, then I hit Alt or Option plus Z, and it just went right back to where it was. So, seems to work. And if I hit it twice, so again, right back to where it was. So, all right, we see Crooked Creek Studios has been a Cubase user since SX2. Thanks for being such a loyal user. All right, so we have Joseph Horvath saying, hi Greg, welcome from Hungary. Used to have a soccer player named Joseph Horvath. Played on Washington Diplomats when I was a kid. All right, Marco van der Mage asks, I would like to see an effects rack add insert. So it's easy, turn that off and on all at once. So if you want to come over, you could just come right over here and turn off all of the inserts on and off at once. If you wanted to do there's now key commands also. So if you want to come over and disable particular inserts, but you could, let me just try under. But there are key commands now where you could disable each insert slot, and you could set up a macro to disable all 16 insert slots. Or just kind of come over here again, and you could just turn on and off your inserts like so. Okay, so Joseph's saying, no question, but want to express my appreciation to you, Greg, for doing these live streams from time to time. So I'm always grateful to be able to help people. Right, you see, let me clear my throat. See Vincent, looks like he's checking out. All right. All right, Anthony Clark asks how to work with four bars with the drum machine. It is only one bar sequencing, or can you extend the drum machine without converting it to MIDI, or should be MIDI? All right, so let's come over here. Let me just add a drum track. Okay, I'll just over here, let's load up quick. All right, so we'll go to the editor since we did this. All right, so right now we see 16 steps. So I think we would just say the number of steps, increase it. So we could do 128 steps. So that would, and then if we wanted to come over here, you You could double the step resolution of the pattern. So just try increasing the steps here. Now will give you 8 measures to work with. So it's not limited to just one bar. All right, so we see Vincent says, okay, maybe it's just not a plugins. I noticed in Cubase to undo mix console step undoes the changes to channel EQ in Cubase 12, but in 14 it does not. All right, so let's take a look at it. So let's open up our channel view here. I'm going to adjust the EQ. We'll turn on adjust magneto. Let's come over, make another EQ adjustment. Let's adjust the fader. Let's adjust the panner. Let's adjust an EQ parameter here. So now we go to our mix console history. So let's go to our mix console, and I'll just go to the mix console history here. And let's open up the channel view so we can see the changes as we go through it. All right. So as I Option Z here, and let me open up the Magneto plugin. And then holding down the Shift, so we could see all those changes automatically carry over. All right, see Pablo likes to reverse reverb. All right, so Vincent just asking, so it works as intended for you, Greg, but not for me. What could it be? It partially works for me if I add an insert removable by clicking Option plus C, but it does not undo, redo. Plugin parameter changes, for example, changes in channel EQ. So he's installing the 14 update from March. So check, just out of curiosity, sometimes, check if you start the program, hold down Command, Option, Shift. And when you do that, see if you could bypass your current preferences and see if that makes a difference for the behavior. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely on from Martinez, California. All right, so we see from Anthony Clark, can we edit the envelope of samples in Groove Agent? All right, so let me just... load up a different kit here. All right, so just... All right, so let's say we want to do this. I will go to Edit, and if we want to now kind of come over and say, okay, I want to do, we could choose kind of different start points. Let's see if I'm on the right sample. If I select the pad, so let's say we want to do just And if we want to come over here, if we want to adjust like the amplifier, we could now just come over here and adjust all of our different nodes. Or if we want to do that for filters as well, so we could set our filter type and say, okay, we want to adjust. And if we also want to do it for pitch, we could set your pitch envelope amount and be able to come over here. So all sorts of different stuff that you could do. So lots of different envelopes. There we see Anthony Clark just says trying to move to one DAW, but has to take the functionalities that's needed. Also creating a template, and I'm including Groove Agent. So yeah. All right, so I'm going to jump to some of the questions that were mailed in advance before we run out of time. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. All right, let's open up a project I created. All right, so the first question was how to import the tempo track from one project into another. Okay, so let's say we have a tempo track here where we see our tempo track changes. So what we could do is just come over here to a new project. And we want to, so we'll set a folder, we want to import tracks from project. So let's come over here, we'll open up this particular project, and we'll say we see our tempo track now, and we'll hit OK. And now that we've done that, we can see all of our tempo track information. Starting at measure 49 there would be imported. So again, go to import tracks from project, and you'll see the tempo track as an option. I think in earlier versions the tempo track wasn't available there, but that's how you could do it. All right, next question. Says, hi Greg, when looking at the mixer in the lower zone, currently when I select a track, the highlight area is kind of white, semi-aqua opacity. The selection highlight spans the mixer top to bottom. If I'm trying to adjust the cue send levels, they're almost impossible to distinguish from the track highlight. The cues are kind of an aqua color, and the two really cancel each other out view-wise. Is there a way in options to adjusting the selected track highlight, color, or opacity? All right, so let's take a look. So we go to our mix console, and let's say if we navigate this higher, or we'll just go. So we'll see that when we go to our cue sends, if we select a particular track, if we wanted to adjust kind of the intensity or the opacity of this track selection, we go to your settings or preferences, and then we'll see track and mix console channel settings. So if this is kind of higher, so now we'll see selection brightness. So if we hit apply, now that could be kind of harder to see, but if we just adjust this down, we can now see that the track could be selected. We'll move it to a happy medium. And now when we go to the cue sends for a selected track, that we could, have, so we see that we could just simply adjust this as expected. So again, preferences or settings, to user interface, track and mix console channel colors, and then you'll see the selection brightness. You could adjust the slider. All right. Question. Hi, Greg. Very odd one here. I've just started editing a film innuendo, and the behavior of the transport bar is strange. I've been through the transport options, but nothing seems to change this. Can you help me? All right. And I think what was going on, this may have been from Michael Pierce, but what was going on in the video that was shared is like if we're moving the cursor and we stop playing, this would kind of work as expected. And then I think when he opened an editor, that when he hit play, that the event kind of jumped. So I think what it is the transport start mode was set to selection start. So if I'm here and I'm not setting any particular settings, so I could, nothing is selected, but then as soon as I select an event and hit play, it will now move to the beginning of the selection because there's an event selected. So if this event is selected, it will start playing from there. If this event is selected, plays from there. But if nothing is selected, we could kind of move the cursor here, but you may not. But if something else is selected where you're looking at in the editor, this is probably selected. And now with that setting, so try just to check in transport that you have the start mode. It's probably set to set from selection start. All right. Question, is there a way to hear MIDI without VST plugins, with or without routing in the next update to Nuendo 14 or Cubase 14? So MIDI itself doesn't have a sound. So MIDI is simply a message that says start playing a note now, stop playing a note now. And then it needs a source, and this is often why we see MIDI instruments or rack modules referred to as tone generators. So MIDI itself doesn't have a sound. It's going to need to be routed to an instrument. It could be an external instrument, so it doesn't have to be a VST. It could be a synthesizer, drum machine, Yamaha Montage, something along those lines. But if you wanted to actually hear it, MIDI itself doesn't have any sound like a WAV file. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. Currently, I'm using Iconica Sketch in Cubase 14. If I load a violin from the strings, I'm unable to play chords. I can only play single notes. I'm using a legato articulation, and the top note rings out with modulation as expected, but I'm playing a chord. The remaining notes are played with staccato articulation, so that they are being played, but with different articulations than the main top note. Is there a setting that governs this? All right, so when we go to like Iconica, so there's legato mode and sustain. So sustain, we could play chords, and then there's legato mode. Now this is kind of like an adaptive legato mode, and this is intended not for chords, but for single voices. Now, if you're running the full Iconica, you may have like ones that are layered for like when you play lower velocities. And the intention is, if I'm playing something very slow, or if I'm playing very fast, that the articulations will change depending on the speed that the samples are played. So when we do this, it's going to be kind of a monophonic mode, and if you wanted to play chords, just choose sustain, because that's not going to be as critical for kind of solo line transitions. That's kind of the intention of that. All right, and we had a question about the user interface for Flux. Someone saying that it's too small. It says, I think the Steinberg developers are all probably 30-year-old guys with their eyes 18 inches from the laptop screen at 1280 by 768. So while Flux isn't necessarily resizable, I think, I'm running a 1920 by 1080 resolution, but when I run Flux, it's while it's not huge, I think you can still get, all sorts of amazing sounds out of it, and I think that the user interface is comfortable. So I'm not sure if you're running like a 4K resolution or what the resolution that you're running, but this is, I think, probably the most common resolution for running Cubase. And yeah, it may be a little smaller. It can't necessarily expand to get larger, but I think it's a pretty comfortable user interface within, considering it's kind of within a host application of Halion or Halion Sonic. But most of our developers are probably more than 30 years old, and I think a lot of them wear glasses like me. All right, so a question, Greg, trying to find some clarification on Chord Pad function as described in the manual, but does not behave as described. Scenario is with the option of selection activated, then holding a chord pad and playing the assigned section keys that are not to send note off messages, but as the image clearly shows, the notes are indeed sending note off messages. Do you have any experience with this that you could share? All right, so let's say if we have our chord pads, all right, so we'll open up our chord pads here, and I think what this is kind of related to is when we have sections that are set up, and then we have kind of, what we call, and when we have sections, instead of like the chords kind of being played, so let's say if we're playing our chords, we can do kind of block chords, or we could do patterns. Now we could also do sections, and as we work with sections, we notice that we have these keys kind of lit up. So what these keys will allow me to do when I press like the C key here, so I'm playing these keys on my controller keyboard. It's not sounding those particular notes. So I'm playing these kind of lightly orange colored notes. And I could so this allows you to kind of manually play 4 notes. And it's going to change based on the selected chord. So I think when we come over, so let's say if we do legato now, so I think when it's the note on, note off, you may see the note on, note off coming from in the MIDI monitor, but it's not necessarily cutting the notes on and off when you're changing chords. All right, next question. Hi, I have the following problem. I can only hear the VST instruments when the yellow monitor next to the record button in the track inspector is activated. It wasn't like this in my previous version. Is something set incorrectly, or can I activate the monitor ever in the preferences? All right, so when I come here, let's say if I'm playing, so if it's record enabled or if it's monitored enabled, we can hear the sound. So the idea is that we could play, why there's a distinction is we may want to play different instruments but only record one instrument. So let's say we have bass in our left hand and organ in our right hand. I only want to record the bass, so I would just record enable the track that I wanted to record, and monitor enable the track that I want to listen to. So those have always kind of functioned independently. If the behavior has changed, try going to your settings, and when you go to project and mix console under editing, it could be that the selected track is automatically when you have enable record on selected track, or it could also be when you go to your VST that you're auto monitoring. That could also have an impact. So this could, like while record running or while record enabled, that the monitor is automatically activated. But it's kind of always worked that way when just the monitoring is turned on, that it would automatically be able to sound the instruments. All right. Next question. What is the best method to play an external sample, load in Xtreme, Pad Shop, or using sample track? So I think the sample track is the easiest way, because you could actually just kind of be here and say, okay, I like this particular sample, and right click and create a sampler track, and you're just immediately playing along with that particular part. So now when you go to the sampler track, so I think that is like the fastest and easiest way to work with that. All right, next question. Can you give an example for trumpet sound, how to change the attack time, make it softer? Okay, so let's say we have a trumpet sound here. So I'm just going to I just have one trumpet note. I'm going to drag this into a sampler track. So now if I want to change like the attack, I could just come over and I'll just take like the attack here. And if you wanted to conversely say, okay, I want it to play to here, and let's do a fade out. So you could just kind of grab those nodes on the trumpet to change. All right, next question. How to splice the samples if it's a vocal to use the words in the pads of Groove Agent. All right, so we have our Groove Agent open here. I'm going to just grab a vocal, drag it to the pad here. So
the way you talk to me is killing me softly. But
right.
I don't mind,
so if I want to,
'cause it makes me feel alive. The way you talk to me is killing me softly, but I don't mind.
All right, so if we want to slice that up, we would just select the pad that the audio is on, go to slice, say create slices, and now and you could just come over here and play those particular slices. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to create selective spaces through panning so that instruments do not clash without using EQ or sidechain? For example, make an instrument audible only in a specific defined left-right space. So yeah, it's pretty common. So if we want to come over, so like a good example that we often see is like kind of a classic 2-guitar band, like a 2-guitar rock band. And, you know, one of the things that's often very typical is, so let's say if we are listening to it here. So we have like, let's say our 2 guitars, that the guitar is panned left and panned hard right so that they're not kind of clashing with each other. So that's very typical, you know, if you have one guitar, one keyboard, to kind of space those out so that they're not really does not really clash. So, and then sometimes you could create a little bit of glue by putting the guitar that's in the right channel, put its reverb only in the left, and the guitar that's in the left, put its reverb only in the right channel. All right, next question. Hello, is it possible to have a power chord like E5 or E note third shown in a chord track? As far as I know, Cubase does not recognize 2 notes as a chord, so no use in creating custom chords and preferences. So there isn't a way, because technically, and as you mentioned, a power chord isn't a chord. It's I guess the technical term would be a dyad. So that's why you don't see that. But, as you mentioned in the next paragraph of your question, that you could kind of add it into the score editor as a chord. All right, with that, we are a little bit over time. I want to thank everyone for the great questions. Hope everyone's learned a new tip or trick, and if you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. And if you will be back on Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Thanks, everyone, for all the wonderful questions, and we'll see you on Friday. Goodbye.